Hello, Mr. Vatanka. We are very glad to have you today. Just to introduce you briefly, Alex Vatanka is the founding director of Iran program at the Middle East Institute, and he specializes in Middle Eastern regional security affairs with a particular focus on Iran. And today we'll have a discussion around the results of the recent elections in the United States and its impact for the region, and especially between the conflict between Iran and Israel and the ongoing military campaigns of Israel in Gaza and Lebanon. So, the first question would like to start with the evaluation of the outgoing Biden administration's Iran policy and especially its response to October 7 attacks and its aftermath, and including Israel's campaigns in Gaza and recently Lebanon. What can you say about this?
So look, I think, what the United States has done over the course of the last year is to basically mostly be engaged in managing tensions in the region, particularly between Iran and Israel, so we don't end up with a regional war. That has been the focus of the Biden administration. Now, critics of the Biden administration say that's too little, that the opportunity was there for this White House, the Biden White House, to take the fight to Iran, to use what happened on October 7th with the Hamas attack on Israel as justification to bring an end to the Islamic Republic. But obviously, we know that the Biden administration never had such an intention, for good or bad. Perhaps they didn't think that was something the United States could do. What they settled on was to prevent, as I said, that wider conflict involving multiple states, and at the same time putting U.S. interests, including the physical safety of American troops, at risk. So that's what the Biden administration has done. I don't know if this is going to change in the next 70 so days left of this Biden administration. And we have to wait and obviously see what the incoming Trump administration might do differently going forward.
Thank you very much. And as a follow-up to that question, do you think Biden administration was successful in restraining Israel and its actions, especially the Netanyahu government? Because there were reports that there were some sort of disagreements over policies and the aims of the Israeli government. Do you think Biden administration was successful in that, or did they really have such a goal, that restraining Israel, restraining Netanyahu and his government?
I think from what we can tell in terms of available material in the open sources, the Biden administration did what it could do to help uh, Israel defend itself in the sense of fighting its military campaign, first in Gaza and then more recently in Lebanon. And that's important to remember. Help Israel defend itself. Now, going to war with Iran is not the same necessarily. That becomes an issue of definition. Some people who believe that the mothership, the Islamic Republic, is the core problem that needs to be tackled, they would say that Biden administration should have not only helped Israel, but should have encouraged Israel to, for example, go after Iran's nuclear facilities and so on. But again, look, there are so many moving parts to this. Question number one that we have to ask, could the United States and Israel together destroy Iran's nuclear program? And that's a really big question. And I don't know if anybody really has a good answer. What we know is that the consensus is that it's a very difficult military operation to go after Iran's many different nuclear facilities. And for that reason, the United States has opted so far not to do so. Again, it remains to be seen what the Trump administration will do. But what the argument that I'm making is the Biden team focused on helping Israel's imminent and immediate security concerns vis-a-vis the Palestinians and Hezbollah in Lebanon. And they never bought into the idea of, you know, helping Israel take the war all the way to Iran.
Thank you very much. And as you mentioned, Trump and his return to the Oval Office How do you anticipate his administration's Iran policy evolving? Could it lead to a broader regional escalation, particularly with Iran and Israel, of course? Or is there potential for some sort of a containment or even a negotiation, possible negotiation with the Islamic Republic?
Look, it's impossible to say what will happen just simply because President Trump in his first term was essentially pursuing at times conflicting, policies. On the one hand, he was very seriously pursuing the idea of direct diplomacy with Iran, the way he did with North Koreans. And on the other hand, he took action that we had never seen before, including killing of Qasem Soleimani in 2020, and obviously unveiling of the maximum pressure campaign against Iran from 2018. So we have to wait and see what Trump administration 2.0 will look like. We still don't even know who the key personnel will be. But some of those folks in his first term that were very anti-Iran, people like John Bolton, Mike Pompeo, and so on, they're not going to be in the second Trump administration. So we have to wait and see if the anti-war voices, and there are plenty of anti-war voices in the Trump inner circle today, if they will have the sort of dominant voice in shaping Trump's thinking about Middle East, or the people who are very pro-Israel in his inner circle, who would make the argument to him that ultimately the United States has to one way or another solve the challenge of the Islamic Republic. Again, we have to wait and see which side Trump will sort of land on, but essentially he is an anti-war president. So even if he takes the gloves off against Iran, one shouldn't imagine a sort of 2003 style invasion of Iraq happening in Iran now. That's not going to happen. But he could provide a lot of support to the Israelis in terms of air power and other types of military assistance to really hurt the Iranians militarily. But again, I think Trump would try and do so without too much direct American involvement.
And as a follow-up to this question, since this is the second and final term of Donald Trump and he doesn't have an election to run, so we can say that his hand will be freer this time, especially towards the end of his second term. So do you think that he himself, or especially the people around him that potentially that will surround, they seek they would seek some sort of deal with Iran, like Obama did, but of course in a different format and maybe in a different structure. Do you think there's a possibility that Trump administration will sign some sort of a deal with Iran involving its nuclear program?
I think there's a total openness on the part of this Trump administration to negotiate directly with the Iranians. In fact, as I said before, he tried to do that many times when he was president, first term. That really depends on whether Iran is willing to talk to Trump. That's not Trump's call. That's Iran's call. Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, in his when Trump was president last time around, said he would never negotiate with Trump, and he said that before Trump ordered the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. So we have to wait and see. The Iranian regime really now has to make a decision. Would they sit there and wait for Trump and his advisors and those people that are trying to influence him come up with a new Iran policy? Or would Iran perhaps want to get in there early and shape Trump's calculations? Because that's an option Iran has. But this is a regime that is very proud. This is a supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, who is very set in his ways. It's difficult for me to see a major open Iranian welcoming or openness to talk to Trump, but they don't have to do it openly. They can find ways quietly through private channels to send a message to Trump that perhaps a deal can be had. But let me also say this. In the best of circumstances, what Iran needs to do now is to not limit itself to the nuclear program. Iran needs to talk to the Americans about what it's doing in the region and other areas of concern for the United States, because the Middle East of 2024 is a very different place than last time Trump was president. And I don't think the Iranians are in a strong position, and the survival of the Islamic Republic certainly will depend on what they decide to do with Trump in the next few years as he's president.
Now moving back to, as you mentioned, the region again, and there was another development in parallel to Trump's election was that Netanyahu firing his defense minister Yoav Gallant, and What do you believe is Prime Minister Netanyahu's strategic endgame in Gaza and Lebanon, and especially following the decision to fire his defense minister? And how might Trump administration's influence uh, be felt over Israel's military and political objectives in the region?
Again, if we have anything to go by, is the first term of the Trump administration. And as he had said repeatedly, he was the best American president Israel ever had. So, is he going to deliver again on that? I don't know. I mean, there are two main sort of forces at play here. One is that he wants to be a good friend to Israel. Second is that he does not want to engage in another war in the Middle East. He is an anti-war president. He wants to help Americans at home deal with issues that they care about, like inflation, like immigration, the state of the economy in general. That's what Trump believes his legacy will be all about. He does not want to become another George W. Bush, taking the country to another war. And by the way, a war with Iran would be the biggest of wars in the Middle East. This is going to be much bigger than what U.S. did in Iraq, and certainly much bigger what happened in Afghanistan. So Trump is aware of that. So he needs to see how he can balance those two forces, or those sort of competing pressures that he's under, helping Israel, but also making sure the United States doesn't end up in another big war in the region. And here, as I said before, Iran has options by talking to Trump, by looking for ways to make certain compromises. Iran could shape Trump's calculations, but it requires obviously that the Iranians talk to him. They didn't do so last time around. They dismissed him, and I think they dismissed him at their own expense. And by the way, talking about long term, you know, Donald Trump chose J.D. Vance as his young vice president with the idea of making Trumpism, if you will, a long-term reality in American politics. I think J.D. Vance is 40 years old. He could be around for another 40 years, right? So again, here's an opportunity for the Iranians to look at and this new political movement, as President Trump-elect calls it, to find ways to talk to them, not because they like Trump or Trumpism, but out of the necessity for securing Iranian interest and preventing war from happening again. So everybody has a role to play here: the United States, Israel, Iran. We just have to wait and see how the different pieces fall into together or not.
And going back to the first part of that question, and you said everybody has a stake in it, and one of the parties is, of course, is Israel. And what do you think is the strategic end game and the plan, the calculus of Prime Minister Netanyahu, and especially with Donald Trump in power now? What do you think he will try to achieve?
He has the main task of, because he said it very clearly, he wants to see the end of the Islamic Republic. So essentially, regime change is what Netanyahu wants. But at the same time, he has a man coming to the White House in a few months' time who is against war. So how can Bibi Netanyahu get Trump to help Israel push the agenda of regime change in Tehran without making Trump uncomfortable, without making Trump think that America is going to end up in another forever war in the Middle East? That's the challenge from Netanyahu, and which basically tells us the best you can hope if you're Netanyahu is that Trump gives you everything you need in terms of air power, missiles, and so on, air defense systems to hit Iran from a distance, or even hit Iran over the Iranian sky, but without having American lives put at risk. Because I think that's Trump's red line, and that's the challenge of Netanyahu. How can he make that happen? That's a best case scenario that I can think of. And the final point I make is, look, Israel has reasons to be very concerned about Iran, given Iran's position on Israel. Nobody can deny that. But there are, practical limitations that Israel has. Israel is a country that is 80 times smaller than Iran, has 8 times less population. And the Israeli military's capacity to go to war with Iran on its own has to be questioned. And that's where the role of the United States is so critical.
Thank you very much. And the last question is this is something that is important for us in Baku. And as you know, the next week will be the COP29 climate conference in Baku. And apparently both presidents of Israel and Iran will be present in Baku at the time. So how does Azerbaijan navigate its relationship with Iran and Israel under these circumstances? And what impacts might the current conflict have on Azerbaijan's geopolitical positions and policies? What do you think about this?
Look, it's a balancing act of sorts, and perhaps people will say it's difficult, it's an impossible position for Azerbaijan to be in. But the reality is Azerbaijan has been successfully balancing this reality for since pretty much independence in 91. Azerbaijan has a track record, it's been able to have pretty good, solid economic security relations with the state of Israel. Less so with Iran, but without having a conflict with Iran. And I think Azerbaijan can do that going forward. The Iranians will have one red line on their part, and this is the challenge for Azerbaijan. That Azerbaijan doesn't become a platform for aggressive Israeli action against Iran. That seems to be their only red line as far as Iran is concerned. So if Azerbaijan can deliver on that, then it can continue successfully balancing its Israeli interest and its Iranian interest. End of the day, geography is what it is, and Azerbaijan's neighbors, Russia and Iran, are not going to go away. They're moving closer to one another. You see integration happening between Russia and Iran, not just membership in BRICS or Shanghai Cooperation Organization, but simple things like the North-South corridor and other sort of regional projects that might come about. I don't know how long Russia will be out in the cold as far as the West is concerned, but as long as Russia is facing the kind of isolation it's facing from the West, and the same is true for Iran, then two of Azerbaijan's neighbors will essentially squeeze Azerbaijan when it comes to Western world and including Israel. And that's another reality that Baku has to carefully navigate. But as I said, Baku has been able to do that so far successfully. There are moments where relations, go down and they come up again, but they come up for a reason. Again, the reality of geography and the reality that Azerbaijan and Iran essentially are better off managing their tensions than allowing these tensions to get out of control, because that's not in Tehran's interest nor in Baku's interest.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vatanka. Thank you very much for this discussion and insightful discussion, and thank you very much for your answers. We were very glad to have you today.
Thank you very much. As you said, is it çok mamnun, Saul, and good to
Yes.
see you.
Yes, çok sağ olun.
Çok sağ ol. Bye bye.